Hey everyone, Dr. Jim Hoven here with the ultimate guest, Dr. Joe Ramos, and we are chopping it up on this episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. So we're going to make a difference for you today, then you're going to take this information and make a difference in the life of someone else. So without further ado, Dr. Joe Ramos.
Oh, we absolutely are going to make a difference. So this is exciting because Dr. Hoven did this podcast with me where I had no clue what I was walking into. It was just podcast on the calendar. And he likes that. He likes that little surprise thing. So I got one for him. I said, okay, I want to do another one. He was like, oh, really? About what? Right now, Gabe, turn on the cameras, turn on the mics.
Here we go.
Yeah. I want, so I've got you on the spot.
Yes, sir.
And this podcast is I think this is going to be difficult. This topic is going to be difficult. And it struck me yesterday when you and I were talking. And I think it's a great one to do a podcast on, and it's this. So let me just warn the listeners right now. Typically when Dr. Hoven and I get together, it's high fives, rah, rah. I mean, we just enjoy each other. We get this energy and excitement going. If we can get energy and excitement going on this topic, God willing, bless us. This is a tough topic, okay? This is a deeper topic, an emotional topic. But let me give a little background to this before I pose the question. The background is this. We've had a rough year at Ramos Law for our family.
Yes.
Have we not? I mean, is rough an understatement?
It would be, for me personally, and an understatement, and absolutely, I've never seen anything like it. And I've been thinking about this, wondering, is it because we're growing that it's a law of averages, that the bigger you get, the more of this you see? Or is it just we're in a incredibly strange time where bad things have happened to good people?
Oh, right. There's been so many bad things happen to good people. And when I say bad things, when I talk about this season, as people call it, it's been, brain tumors in close friends, multiple deaths of family members, the loss of a son, speaking with you directly. Currently, as we speak, one of our longest time here teammates is in the hospital with their son in the ICU on a ventilator. Fifth or sixth surgery today, potentially loss of long-term function, life-altering. I mean deep, hard stuff. And so here's the question. And we're going to do this today in 25 minutes because I can't stand a tough topic for longer than that. Okay?
Yeah, I'm with you.
To be honest with you, I'm already struggling. But here's the topic, and I want to ask you specifically because I know this has confronted me. I bet it's confronted many of our listeners before. And it's, what do you do for someone close to you, or not close to you? What do you do for someone in pain? What do you do for someone hurting? I find that there's a way I like things for me when I'm in pain or I have something tough. I'm kind of the typical, work hard, go in my cave type of a person. But that's not everybody. And what happens when you love the people around you, when you form this bond, this close thing where you call them family, and then something bad happens to them or with them or surrounding them, are they really, how do you treat them? What do you do? So let me frame the question very clearly here. I want to talk to you today about, in the time of deep loss, what helps you the most? And I want to talk about what's the most painful in the time of deep loss. And I want you to be very transparent about it. And I'm sorry if it brings up hard emotions, but I really want to know, what helps and what hurts and what can people do? Because I bet everybody out there listening today knows or has had or is currently experiencing some sort of pain or deep loss or something in someone close to them. And they're going, what can I do for them? And people run through this gamut of thoughts. I want to take them a meal. I want to call them. I want to text them. Or let me run to the hospital and be there. And then your mind tells you, oh no, they don't want me in the hospital. That's a private space. Probably don't want to talk about this. This is really hard. They're fielding 1,000 calls. I don't want to be 1,001 and a burden on them. And then the other part of your mind comes back and tells you, you're not doing anything. You don't care. You're not showing your love. Do you really care? Are they really your family? And you get this mind battle going if you're the person trying to support someone in a period of loss. So I'd like you to share with us, Dr. Hoven, You've been through a loss that is immeasurable, truly immeasurable. Anybody who's a parent can't even imagine what you've been through. The loss of Connor. And what's helpful? And explain it from, if you would please, from your perspective, but also, I mean, if it's not going too much into a private area, your wife's perspective, yes, your children's perspectives, because maybe you each have a different perspective, but any perspective you can share will be helpful.
Well, first of all, talk about a topic that I was not ready for.
Not a fun one.
But that's the beauty of our relationship, is we can talk about anything. We have that trust with each other and that connection. And I've been fortunate enough that before last year, so we're in 2022 now, finishing up 2022. In 2021, I lost my dad. And my dad and I were close, but in small doses, meaning I loved him with all my heart once I accepted who he was as a person, because we were so very different. And so once I accepted that, I loved him dearly, but he was a tortured soul in some senses. He had cancer, stage 4 cancer, that hadn't spread, but it was, according to his oncologist, quote unquote, gonna take him out. And then he ended up dying of sepsis in a weekend. And so it was unexpected. Wow. It was shocking, because that was not when he was supposed to go. And just everything around it broke my heart for a short time. Mm-hmm. And then losing a son 4 months ago tomorrow will be when we did lose Connor, totally unexpectedly, totally, like shouldn't have happened. It just didn't seem right at all in any way, and so it was so unexpected. So I tell you all that to just frame this up with, prior to losing my dad, the worst loss I'd ever known personally for me, I'd lost 2 grandparents, but the worst thing I'd ever felt was the loss of a family dog. That dog really broke my heart. And so that was different. But it was a dog, and I loved the dog. Yes. But that was the worst of it. Okay. So then losing a father, and within a year losing a son.
Wow, things got stepped up for you in a hurry.
In a hurry. So all of a sudden it all magnified. And so I will tell you, I didn't have experience with loss, and being, you know this above all, as a chiropractor, I saw a lot of people in pain, and I saw a lot of patients, lots and lots of them, who had lost people. So I experienced loss secondhand, or maybe even thirdhand. You in the ER watched people lose their lives and lose their quality of life every single day. And you had to be the one, like the doc that told me that our Connor wasn't going to make it. It wasn't looking good. And then he didn't make it. You had that opportunity and that job and responsibility. I'm blown away by how you can show compassion and still go through and do that on a regular basis. So again, all that is the function of the basis of things. I didn't have an idea on how to really support myself and what I needed. So as part of the experiential tale, I'll tell you, you were the first one in action when you heard that I lost Connor, you and Paige, and said you wanted to bring up food that night. He passed on a Tuesday. And so Shauna got a text, and that's my wife. And so she had said, while we were driving home from the hospital, and said, the Ramoses want to bring up food. And I literally couldn't do it. I couldn't. I said, no, I'm not ready to see anybody. And only because, I'd cried so much, I had felt so much, that seeing someone that I'm really close to, I just didn't know that I could handle the emotional side of it. And I was exhausted, and all I wanted to do was just be, Yes. And so from my perspective, what I thought I needed was actually different than what I needed. What I should have done was I should have said, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not the least bit hungry, right? And I'll tell you, this is kind of funny. I didn't eat for a while after that, but man, did I love freaking ice cream. My wife and I lived on ice cream over the next 4 weeks, man. It was nuts. But
did Connor like ice cream?
He loved ice cream.
Oh, geez,
I think we probably loved it more than he did in those 4 weeks. It was like a comfort food beyond comfort food. But you guys, you showed what it was like to be a friend, to just be there with something. And so my nature, like yours, and I don't know how people are divided up in this, because again, loss is relatively new for me. My nature is to step back and say, I got to put my head down and get things done. In this case, where's the funeral home going to be? What about different accounts that he might have had? Because he was 25, he was working, he had stuff going on, right, that had to now be dealt with. How do I take care of my family? How do I make sure that my wife is okay? How do I make sure that the things that I'm responsible for in my life, at work, outside of work, whatever, we got dogs to take care of. I got a team that I lead. Like all that's going through my mind. And my nature is you get down to business, you take care of business. And when business is taken care of, then you heal, right? That's how I was trained. Like, so that's just what you did.
So the business, literally, if I'm hearing you correctly, what crossed your mind was, the business of life that you regularly live, the business of the death of your son, and the business of taking care of that, if you want to call it that, right?
Yes.
If you mentioned funeral home and his accounts and stuff, and then almost like kind of like the business of your family as well, and probably how you had to lead or support or them. So all this is racing through your mind. And I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but but it's a time I have to ask this. Is there anything at that moment, if you can think back then, I'm asking you to go back and that's tough to do. Is there anything at that moment with the business of that, of any of those aspects, that someone could have helped out and done or offered? Or did you just was that part of your process? You needed to do that business. If I had reached out to you and said, hey, I can help you find a funeral home, would that have been rude or inappropriate? Well accepted? How would that have been? That would be in helping you in the business of one area. If I reached out to you and said, hey, don't worry about work. Is that too work focused, not focused enough on your son? I'm going right to work. Right?
Yeah, no, what a great question.
So is there anywhere somebody could have reached out in any of those areas when you went into work mode, when you went into that type of processing, that someone could have done to help?
Fascinating and perfect question, and I would have never thought of it. The answer is absolutely on several fronts. You and the team here did say, don't come back to work till you're ready, right? No time, just you got to do what you got to do for you and your family. So that did happen, and I'll go more into that in a minute. But the asking about funeral homes, about this and that, people did jump in there too, and it was really, really helpful. They were, because Connor had so many people that loved him. There were people saying, can we do this? Can we look at this? And our daughter, Tony and Connor were best friends, and Tony was devastated, as you can imagine, by all of this. But right away, even through the tears, even through the grief, she's an event planner by training, and she wanted to make sure that his memorial service was one that would do him justice.
Wow, and she did that, let me tell you.
Yeah, she was so amazing. Special. She did so good. So people were there. Someone wanted to start a donation thing to pancreatitis or pancreatic cancer foundation. So people were there. And then in my family, certainly my mom, who is my mom is an angel on earth, but she doesn't know, she's not going to jump right in and I'm flying out there, I'm staying. She wants to respect everybody's boundaries. Do you need anything? Can I help you? So we did have that, thankfully, but here's where it was really amazing for me, where I knowing myself was not knowing what was best for me, which is a weird dichotomy most time. Most time you know yourself, you follow that path and it works out. But in this case, knowing who I typically am, put your head down, get the work done, and then heal later. Yep. This is so foreign. I've explained this to a few people, and everyone looks at me with two heads, or like I have two heads, because what was so foreign to me was, so we have 4 children. One passes, all 3 of the others are adults. And so 2 of them have significant others, all 3 of them have significant others, with one of them being married. And so of those 6 kids, they're all busy. 2 of them live in Wyoming, 4 of them live here, and every one of them took the rest of the week off.
Wow.
Right? So he passes on a Tuesday. They all, the 2 of them are just trying to struggle to make ends meet, but yet they gave up everything to be with us. Wow. And it was a brilliant insight by someone that we both work with, Danielle, who I was explaining this. I'm like, I don't understand it, because I don't know that I'm an only child, but I don't know if I had a brother or sister that had passed away, would my nature be to say, I'm going to take the rest of the week off and I'm going to stay with you. They didn't leave our house. They didn't leave our side. They made sure everything was handled to support us. And again, I found it to be, I didn't think I needed it, but looking back, it was exactly what I needed. I needed those people there.
Your core family,
my core
your
family,
kids, your wife.
Yep.
And you needed them right by you. And you didn't know why or what necessarily, but just there.
Yeah. And once I was feeling it,
yes,
I'm like, this is the best thing that could have happened to me.
Wow.
And then I had a friend, and you know him, his name is Sean, and he's a super, super interesting guy, a very spiritual guy, a very confident in who he is guy. And he had said to me so he passed on Tuesday, on Friday, he said to me, hey, do you want me to come up? And I said, no, I'm good. And he goes, see you in 20, right? It wasn't a choice because he sensed something in me that I didn't express to him and I didn't even necessarily know, but then he just showed up.
Wow.
He showed up.
Wow.
See you in 20. And when he got there, he's really big about just the spiritual, energetic, connecting side of things. So he put his hands on me, he hugged me, he wanted to make sure that we were good, and then he gave me words of wisdom, and it was very comforting. And I took that from, and here's another example. We have a young guy here that does all our digital marketing, Rami Joe, and he's doing an amazing job for us. He moved here from Lebanon. After the interview that we did with him, he had all these opportunities, and he chose here because he believed in who he spoke to. So he chose to move across the world, come here, and it's been amazing. He's 22 years old now. And so this young guy who's younger than my son, who's no longer here, decides that he's going to buy me 2 books on grief and dying from a Jewish rabbi. And I said, how did you pick these books? First, I'm tearfully thanking him when he gives them to me. I said, how did you pick these books? And he says in his thick Lebanese accent, I looked up and they seem to have the best reviews. So he gives me these books and I read them. And one of the things that I will never forget, Dr. Ramos, from those books, that was what was exhibited for me by my by the kids and by my friend Sean and by everyone here at work. In times like these, sending a text saying, if there's anything you need, let me know, doesn't work. You show up.
Wow, that's powerful.
Powerful. And so when I read that, I'm like, that's what happened. And so now, fast forward, we have people going through stuff. Since Connor has passed, we have one person whose family was abducted in Mexico and dismembered. We got one family who lost someone with kids, one of our team members. We got this person that you were talking about whose son is, unless a miracle happens, his life is 180 degrees different direction than what it was a week ago.
That's right.
And when you look at all of that, sending texts that say, if there's anything you need, we don't know what we need.
Right.
We don't know what we need.
Yeah,
and that's what I learned from all this.
Getting that sense. Right.
So showing up with a hug, you don't, and here's what I also learned, you don't have to have the right words. I'm sorry, I can't imagine how you feel. This is unbelievable. You hear it once and it's one thing, you hear it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And so after this, I think I've been a much better supporter to these people to say, I'm here for you, but know this, I'm sending good thoughts and prayers. I care for you and I love you.
Wow.
And then try to show up and say, and not for anything, just to be, and if that's for literally 1 minute, give a hug and move on, that's enough. Right. That's what I found.
See, that is, and you took my next question, because how I was going to get you to answer that question at the next level you just did, which I was going to say to you, you know my sons.
Mm-hmm. I do.
2 boys, right?
Beautiful human beings.
21 and 19, also in that, I don't know, vulnerable, exploring.
Experiencing life.
Yeah, experiencing life part. And I was going to ask you, if one of my sons died, what would you do for me? What would you do? What would be the first thing you would do?
Yeah.
What I'm hearing you say is I'd show up. Mm-hmm. Here's I'd show up, even if it was for a second.
Yep.
If it was for 5 minutes, if it was for 5 hours.
Yep.
I'd just show up, because it might be a hug.
Yep.
It might be a I love you. It might be I'm here for you, but I'd show up.
That's exactly what it would be. And I would be now in a sense of trying to, as the cliche goes, read the room. And so in the Jewish tradition, which I learned from this book, they have a very structured and regimented death ceremony, if you will, for when someone passes. And thank goodness I'm not Orthodox Jewish, because it would have been a little rough for me. But for the first 7 days, and forgive me if I'm getting this off for those of you that know this better than I do, for the first 7 days, the family is in mourning. And when people come to visit the family, they keep their house open. But when people come to visit the family, they do not speak unless spoken to. And they are just there for support. So if they just sit there and that person never asks them a question, never asks them to input, they don't say anything. And they're there as long as they're there, and then they leave. And then it goes on where this process goes on for a year, where for the first 30 days you don't go see anything that would be considered entertainment. Nothing, because you're in mourning. And then it goes for this period, so that basically for the first year, you're really restricting yourself to focusing on this person, their loss, God and his role in all of this, So, but showing up and reading the room and knowing when to talk and when not to talk, how long to stay, how long not to stay, biggest lesson I've learned as far as that goes.
Man, those are some huge words of wisdom. So if you can, I always hate to ask somebody to put words in somebody else's mouth or explain somebody else's feelings, but I know you're very connected with your kids. I know you're very connected with your wife. I know this because you're my good friend. I know how you are and just the richness you pour into your family. Would they say the same thing you would say? Would your wife say the same thing? Would your kids say the same thing? Or is there a difference with age? So, for example, your kids who might be younger or who had a different relationship with Connor, would they maybe want something different? Would your wife? Tell me if there's anything to learn from that.
Here's what I learned as a knucklehead husband for my wife.
Okay.
When people were asking to bring meals, my nature is I'm really self-sufficient, and we're good. It's not like, it's not like we need anything. Plus, it's not convenient because we don't live in the city. We don't live where everybody else lives. We live up the mountain, from work, it's 45 minutes to, one way. And since I work with a lot of people up here, to ask them to go out of their way to bring stuff for me, I just felt weird about it. But what I didn't consider is my beautiful, amazing bride, she has to cook something for us to eat once we started eating again, which took days, but she would have to cook something, or she would have to get something, or we would have to go somewhere. So we still wouldn't be able to do the grieving process kind of in the same way. And so I was selfish in that way. And I wasn't intentionally selfish. I was trying to be intentionally kind. I don't want to put you people out. Because by then, a few days down the road, I'm ready to see people and just accept their love. But I don't know if it was pride or not want to inconvenience people. But what I realized is I was really much inconveniencing my wife. Wow. And so then it turns out that our neighbor down the street, his wife didn't listen to anything that I said. And she brought over several meals that would last a couple days. And so literally she fed our family for a week. Our next door neighbor brought pizza over one night, and so our neighbors really stepped in and did, even if I didn't ask them to, that goes back to that thing of just did. So what Shauna, I think, would tell you is, so from my wife's perspective, it would be open your heart and accept the blessings and the gifts. But here's the thing, specifically with food, like our managing partner, Randy Manning here, who you don't see as an emotional guy, right? He's not that guy.
Not at all.
And he's not extroverted, effervescent. He's just a really good-hearted dude.
Yeah.
The next thing I knew, in 5 seconds, he texts me and he goes, I got you guys a $250 Uber Eats card. How thoughtful. I never thought of it. Never crossed my mind in a million years that was even a thing. But that was a way that we could, great idea, because now we could use it as we deemed as what. So when we were hungry, we could eat. Not when, because if 10 people bring over 10 dishes, 8 of those are going to go to waste because you can't eat that much.
Right.
And they all get brought at the same time. So that would be from my wife's side is allow people to come in. From my kid's side, I think from their perspective, especially Tony was, again, destroyed. She was destroyed. And it was all about, for the kids, coming together. The thing that they needed the most was for the family to be together. That was what they needed. In fact, one of the ways that we celebrated Connor, and some people might have thought it was too soon, right? Again, every family has to go through this in the way they have to go through it.
Yes.
In that one of the things we did, he passed on Tuesday. On Friday, he loved to fly fish. Connor loved to fly fish. And so he and I had fly fished on Father's Day weekend, the week before he died.
Yes.
And my wife Shauna, and I had fished the week before that. So 2 weekends before we had fished, it was our favorite thing to do together. And so that Friday, all of us as a family went to that spot where we fished. And what we did was, some of the kids had never fished, so I took 4 rods, and I wanted them to experience just a little bit about what he experienced. And there was actually some joy there.
Really?
There was some joy there. And then we all found
chills.
It was crazy. We took rocks, and we all wrote a message on the rock in a Sharpie pen.
Yeah.
And then we took those rocks and we stacked them in a place where we know that even if the ink goes away, the rocks won't move. And so that was something that we did to heal.
Yes.
As a family. So.
Wow, that's really special. So as a person on the outside looking in, wanting to help someone you love, the emotion that you go through, and I experienced this with my own wife with you guys. One mate says, let's do this, this will help. Another mate says, yeah, that's great. And then they change their mind and say, no, because I don't want them to feel like you're obligated to talk to us. They're obligated to open their house or their whatever. Well, how would you counsel spouses who want to give? Let's not use Connor and your family on this one. Let's use our current family member who has her son in the ICU, his life completely changed forever. If one spouse wants to go be there, another spouse says no, give them their space. How do you reconcile that between the spouses? Do you think it's okay for you do what you want to do, I'm do what I want to do?
What a great question.
What do you think about that?
So 2 things come to mind. One is we should all do our best to live life from our heart. Because what I believe is that there's a connection if we're open, and not everyone's open, but if we're open and we're connected to that part of the universe, God, ourselves, whatever you say, if we're connected and we're listening because we put the time into investing in being a good listener of this kind of thing, it'll tell us what to do. And sometimes what to do is do what you think, but then be aware. So in the case of 2 different spouses doing 2 different things, if they both feel strongly about their thing, then they should both do their thing.
Wow.
That said, if they both, in the case of our team member, knowing that it's a hospital, we all know how hospitals are, and if there's a lot of people there, like when Con passed, there were 20 people there, right?
Wow.
And so there was a lot of people there, and I relished it.
You did.
I relished it because it brought me solace knowing that all these people loved him, and it was only the start. It was only the start, but it helped me not just be in there alone, even though I was a lot of times alone in my head, with all the people around. I was still alone, but I could feel them, and they wanted me to feel them. So in this case, with this person, showing up and then knowing when to get out.
Yeah.
Showing up, if it's literally, here's an example. Another one of our team members whose mom was passing away, she called me, and she's our marketing person here. And so her mom was getting ready to pass away. And as I was driving by, I just called her. And I knew that her mom was at the same hospital where my dad died. And I said, hey, would it be okay if I just stop by? Would it help, or would it make things worse? You tell me. Oh. And she said, you know what? It would help. And I just stopped by. I never went into the room. I never entered the hospital. It was a beautiful, spring day. And I went and I just loved on her, and her whole family was there. And the fact that I would just take time out of my schedule to go there meant a lot to her. And I didn't do it to mean a lot to her from that side. I did it because I wanted to fill her cup in any way I could for 5 minutes. I ended up staying an hour.
Wow.
So just knowing what the circumstance dictates, if you're listening to your heart because you're tuned in, and then you're just doing your best and you're sensitive. The whole thing in my mind, be sensitive to what you're seeing.
Wow, those are such great words of wisdom. I mean, that's so helpful to me to hear this. It's something that, despite all of the death I've seen in my life as a physician, in level 1 trauma centers, despite the death I've seen in my own family, because I come from a huge family. You know, my dad being the youngest of 12, me being the oldest of 8. You still, despite all of that, it's not something you get better at with experience.
Mm-hmm.
You really don't, you don't know. And there's this, I think, hypersensitivity to, I got to do the right thing. And what I've learned today is you don't have to do the right thing. You just have to listen to your heart. And you have to be sensitive. You have to listen. You have to show up. You have to read the person. When have you given them enough love? And get out.
Yes.
You have to be creative. Is it an Uber Eats card that they can use when they want? I think those are great words of wisdom. Last thing, I know I said 25 minutes. I think we're at the 30-minute mark now, just like that. But this has been really helpful. I mean, I really appreciate you pouring your heart out. Here's the last question to kind of wrap it up on.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the acute event where you go through the trauma, the death, the loss, and people wondering how to react and what to do and what to say and such. And we've covered that well, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think about the long term? So, for example, would it bother you if on Connor's 1-year anniversary, I didn't say something to you? Would it bother you? Am I a better friend to you to remember that it's 1-year anniversary, or am I a better friend to you to be sensitive that I don't want to open a wound on your heart that kind of healed in a little bit, and it's actually starting to feel a little bit better, and all of a sudden I come up and, hey man, sorry about Connor's death today on that 1-year date. What do you think about long-term support and being there for someone? Is it necessary? Give me your perspective for you, and again, if you can relate to maybe what your wife may think. I wish we had her here today to ask her herself, but what do you feel about that? I often wonder, for example, my wife's mom passed of breast cancer, and I know the exact day she passed. I know when her birthday is, and I'm always hesitant to bring it up to my wife. Sometimes I'll do it gently. I'll just say, well, happy birthday to your mom today, kind of a thing as we're passing.
Yes.
And I almost don't know if I'm bringing a tear to her eye of happiness or of joy.
Yeah.
Of joy or sadness. I'm sorry.
Yes.
And so with my own wife, I don't kind of have down that anniversary date of a bad event yet on what's right. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the anniversary date for you of that painful?
Wow, what an interesting question, in that, I'm still at the point where I went from counting weeks to now I'm counting months. So a week 1, I'm like, it's been a week, it's been 2, it's been 8, it's been 12. Once I got to the 3-month point, which was last month, I'm at 3 months. Now I wasn't counting, 19 weeks or whatever. So now 4 months is tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so while I can't speak to a year, I will tell you, again, for me, I have done a lot of work since this on the spiritual side of my life, a lot, in comparison to what I had done before, in order to help me understand, not necessarily why it happened, because who knows why it happened, but why it serves me to make me a better person, right? Why it's okay that it happened. Because what I know is I've seen 2 types of people, and I'm sure you have too, and maybe there's a gap in between there, or a spectrum. Some people can handle loss really, really, really well, at least externally. And what it happens internally, I don't know. Imagine if you're with your brothers in a big military group and a whole bunch of people get wiped out, and then you see it again and again. Essentially, something happens to you, right?
Right.
And some people are less sensitive to it than others, to loss in general. And then we've got other people, and one of our mutual friends, his mom fell into this category where she lost her husband, and it was minimum 25 years, and all she could think about, talk about, and ruminate on was him and his loss and how great life was before. And in my mind, it really tempered the quality of her life from that point forward.
Right, yes.
And the reason I think that's important is because if we were talking to her, asking her, would you like to have the remembrance of Carol, which was his name, would you like to have that brought up? It might bring a lot more pain, unless it was done very carefully and skillfully, like, you know what, this is a celebration of a great man who was a great father, and look at these things, and he'd be so proud, and he's looking down, like that way. And for me, it wouldn't be a problem at all. Like, man, and what a great, and maybe it goes to that, remembering the person, as opposed to coming out and saying, I'm so sorry it's 1 year, I'm so sorry it's 10 years, and instead of saying, what an amazing human soul that we had the chance to be with for this long. In my case, 25 years, you know, in some other case, it might be 85 years.
So if you're going to remember something, if you're going to remember the anniversary, remember something great with it.
Yes.
Would be your perspective. Fill that day with something that's joyful and positive about that remembrance of the sad event, but without the sadness part of it.
Absolutely,
so to say.
That's for me.
The uplifting.
Yes, and one more, and of course, you know, if someone dies of a traumatic, like they got shot by a gang member, or something, that might be a whole different animal, because it might bring up the violence behind it. I don't know, but I will tell you this as kind of my final thought on that. There are people here that have not left my side figuratively from the day that the thing happened, that they might not still send the beautiful text with the IGF that it's you know, someone hugging or someone,
yes.
But they have deepened their relationship with me, and that is the ongoing memory of the event. So now our relationship is better because I had a loss. And I could name 3 people right off the top of my head that's happened to. So, you know, I think that it carries on, and just in that way, now you remember the person on the daily.
That's cool. Well, I mean, that seemed to time flew by. We went
so
longer,
fast.
We went longer than I had planned on. It is a deep topic, and I appreciate you sharing, because I don't know if I haven't been there, and I haven't walked in your shoes in what you've recently been through, and it's still a fresh wound. But I wanted to ask, because I love you as a person. I love who you are. I love everything about you. I care about you. And I know there's many people out there that care about someone next to them, and they just want to just love them and pour into them. And that whole confusion about that, sometimes you wonder, is it Satan that's kind of pulling me away from what I should be doing and casting this doubt in my mind? Is it whatever? And to talk to you, it's firsthand, man. You're just telling me, here's how it is, and here's what helps, and here's from your perspective, and that's firsthand. That's better than any. That's a better way for me and for our listeners to hear this than listening to our own minds.
Well, thank
our own
you.
minds run circles. And
what a great point.
And so thanks for the time today. Thanks for sharing deeply in that way. And that's what Ramos Law and our Difference Makers podcast is about. It's about sharing, and thanks for sharing on a tough topic.
Oh, no, it was my pleasure. Thank you for thinking of it, especially off the cuff. It let me not prepare. It just let me, flow from whatever was inside. So, no, what a treat. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Enjoy the time with you, my brother.
All right, my man. You're the best.